Hello and welcome to Newspeak, New Culture Forum's weekly look at the news agenda. As ever, I'm pleased to say I'm joined by these two gentlemen, Rafe Heydel-Mankoo and Philip Kiszely, our senior fellows. Rafe, of course, being a Royal Commentator and Historian, and Dr. Philip Kiszely from Leeds University. It's been quite a week and it won't need that much explaining to you that we're going to discuss the Rwanda screw up, actually, if I can be quite frank about it, the resignation of Suella Braverman, and indeed the question of whether Nigel Farage should indeed go into the jungle. First off, actually, Rafe, with this Rwanda ruling in the Supreme Court, there is the view of many people that, in fact, this doesn't actually make very much difference. It was kind of doomed from the start anyway. Would you agree with that?
Well, what I would say is that government lawyers have known this was going to be the actual end result. This was going to be the decision of the Supreme Court. And what is the bigger question is, well, if they knew this, why have we wasted the last year going down this road? There are all sorts of measures, some of which we may go on to mention. Suella Braverman, in her glorious resignation letter, actually listed the things she had wanted inserted into the actual agreement with Rwanda, which could have circumvented some of the points raised by the Supreme Court, including trying to put a notwithstanding clause to make sure that the ECHR didn't apply to it, and all sorts of things, none of which were done. And so you do sort of have to wonder, how serious was this government, or is this government, about stopping the small boats? Because it seems as if, Sunak has been fiddling while our borders burned. We've lost so much time. There are other initiatives that could have taken place at the same time. There's no real plan B that's in place. There's talk about maybe having a treaty now with Rwanda, because a treaty has more force or effect than just a memorandum of understanding, and having Parliament sanction it as a way to actually make the courts more reticent about getting involved with the whole thing. But I just think it stinks to high heaven, and it just goes to show the lack of seriousness and the weakness of this government, and the failure to actually understand the seriousness of the issue, I think.
Apparently, actually, Philip, according to an anonymous civil servant, via Steve Edgerton in the Telegraph, many civil servants hate the whole idea of it, and indeed are probably celebrating at its failure.
Does that surprise you? That doesn't surprise me at all. It's one of those things, isn't it, where we knew that this was going on. We knew that they weren't serious. We knew that they didn't care. And the Suella Braverman letter, which I think was just outstanding. It was a wonderful piece of literature. It should be on the syllabus in every school, shouldn't it? It just confirms what we know about the Conservative Party. They are not interested in doing anything. They are prepared to let this country go to the dogs. We are unsafe, and I think we've seen over this last few weeks with mass immigration, illegal and legal, we have a sense of culture clash all the time. We have no shared values. We've said this every week, and this is because we have open borders. And they knew that the Supreme Court would just kibosh this straight away. They knew it. And they did nothing. There is no plan B. I'm just repeating what you said, but you're absolutely right. It's appalling. And they're right down in the polls at the moment, aren't they? We were just talking before about a poll where their Reform are just 8 points below them. Whether we can trust that, I don't know. But they deserve to be obliterated, and I can't wait for them to be obliterated.
But the point you just mentioned about the Home Office and this anonymous person who spoke out, is that it's true, right? Because not only do we have the government being completely incompetent on this point, maybe deliberately incompetent, we also have the fact that the Home Office is deliberately trying to derail any attempt to get serious about this issue. And it's well worth reading. There's actually an article, I think, in the Telegraph, which our viewers may want to go to read about how this Home Office person shows how much effort is made to try to obstruct the government in its duty. And never forget the person in charge at the Home Office of looking after the issue of illegal migration resigned from the Home Office to take up a job with Amnesty International.
Yes.
Now, if that doesn't
Tells
tell you all you need to know
Yes,
about
yes.
the mindset of the type of people that we have trying to put into place conservative policy, then, I mean, it speaks volumes.
But it's amazing how things have changed, isn't it? If you remember, you think back to Yes Minister, it always used to be the officials trying to stop the politicians doing anything. Now it's both of them working together in concert and making sure that nothing gets done.
Apparently, though, in this article you mentioned there in the Telegraph, this guy also makes the point, I assume it's a man, I'm sorry, but he also makes the point that Suella Braverman, which is something I've always felt, actually, to go a little bit against the spirit of the time, is that she was all fluster, but actually when it came to it, she was basically sucking up to them. That in meetings with civil servants, she would say, what a great job you're doing. She never kind of cracked the whip, that this was all for public consumption. And I mean, I remember when we've talked about her before, it was a bit like Priti Patel, but talked about Suella Braverman, there was always that slight feeling I have with her. I mean, do you think that that's unfair?
I don't know. It's difficult to tell because some reports you do read that, and I've heard that, but other reports they're singing from the rooftops because she's gone, because they all hated her because she was all of the things that are opposite to that. So it's really difficult to know. She was powerless, I think, because the party is finished. The party is useless. In a way, it doesn't matter. It's great that she said all of these things. It's great that she's come out, fighting, and it's great that she's trying to sink the ship. But it really doesn't matter because they're, for me and for all of our viewers, they're over. We need to be looking at something else. We need to be, where does she go from here? What would be really interesting is if she jumps ship and goes to Reform or something like that. But, I don't suppose.
I mean, I've been a critic of her, as you well know, saying that tough talk is great, but where's the action?
Yeah.
But in terms of her, but actually reading this letter of resignation that she put out, I actually was very impressed. If everything was true, all the things that we've been calling for to happen, she actually behind the scenes was trying to make them happen. And she seems to have been thwarted and opposed at every single turn by number 10. So why she was nice to the civil service, maybe it's, it's softy, catchy monkey. Maybe she thinks, unlike Priti Patel, who riled them up the wrong way, well, I'll try the other approach to it. But what it does show is the importance of Dominic Cummings' plan to reform the civil service. If we actually had special advisors who were put into the civil service to actually on the ground ensure things are being put through. It is also an indictment of our whole system of having such short-lived cabinet ministers, because now we have James Cleverly in role. He's naive and new to the role. They're going to run circles around him and nothing ever gets done. And that's all that they do. It's a waiting game for the civil service because they know it's a revolving door of cabinet ministers who come through.
Particularly now. They've just got to kind of carry on, just doing what they've been doing for about a year maybe, and it will be over. Actually, one thing that was interesting about the letter we mentioned, which I was unaware of, but I think that everyone would be unaware of, wouldn't they? Is that this deal that actually she tried to do with Rishi Sunak, who now, the Prime Minister, who now comes out of this rather badly. I mean, not that he was held in a very high esteem, but he basically ignored her and did the dirty on her, didn't he?
I mean, there's a couple of things here. I mean, she says it's a deal, but she actually says it's a document. I think she uses the word document in the letter, doesn't
quite
she?
Formal, yes.
And she makes a cutting, passing reference to Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, doesn't she, when she says, this wasn't something over dinner, their pact over dinner, which Blair then reneged on. This wasn't something over dinner. This was a document. And then she goes on to talk about his magical thinking, which I just think is a wonderful phrase. Him by faith alone trying to muddle through and not upset anybody and deal with this huge policy thing, deal with Europe, deal with all of these things. And she just shows him up for what he is.
Can I ask you, I mean, this is, you might say, oh, for goodness sake, I mean, haven't we talked about this enough? And I know that many people watching will certainly have their views on it. But time and again, it comes back to this point. If they are doing nothing about it and have no intention of doing anything about it, what is their motivation for that? If they said, yes, we're doing something about it and we're stopping the boats and we're cutting migration by about half, blah, 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 all of that, they would be elected straight away. So I can understand why people don't quite get this, because if the votes are there, why is it actually the case that they do not intend to do anything about it? Why?
I don't know, because
we've got to know this, haven't we?
The thing that really drove this home to me today was, not today, sorry, a couple of days ago, was David Cameron is back in the mix. Why on earth is he back? You know, with I tweeted they've just lost the grassroots. So you would think if they want power and they want to continue, or at least they want to avoid the biggest landslide of the century, then they're going to listen to the grassroots. They're actually going to be conservative, because every poll suggests that's what they should do. And yet they don't do it. But it reminds me of the monarchy. It's this trying to appeal to the people who hate them because they're in a bubble and they think that those are the people they should appeal to.
So that's precisely what's happening, right? It was William Hague that brokered the deal for Cameron to come back in.
Him first, didn't they?
And the whole thing, they're trying to shore up the blue wall, and to hell with the red wall is their mentality. Because these chaps, the Bullingdon Club, all of these privileged chaps that we see back in the halls of power, were never comfortable with the grassroots. They didn't know how to deal with the issues of the red wall, and it made them uncomfortable, and they weren't prepared to deal with it. And now we see what they're doing. They're just going back to familiar territory again, bringing back Cameron, trying to go back to Middle England, and it's a completely it's a complete failure to understand the massive political realignment we had post-Brexit, where we had traditional working class, small C conservative Labour voters going to the Tories, and actually Tory voters becoming Lib Dems. This is a seismic, not even once in a generation, this is sort of a once in a twice a century sort of realignment, and their complete failure to take a grasp of that. They could have been in power to 2029, to 2034. They've messed up the entire thing.
And it's a classic Tory thing of thinking about the economy and completely ignoring culture. We know that culture is in the driving seat. But I mean, people like Matthew Goodwin have talked about this, and anecdotes about talking to the Conservative Party and them just not taking on board the polling, them just not taking on board what people think. You know, it's only certain people like Nick Timothy would do that, but other people, I remember him talking about this, simply would not do that.
It's because their echo chambers are still economically based, and they still think about free markets, and they still think about big business. That's the difference between Labour and the Tories. Labour wanted mass migration for a whole bunch of reasons, including to actually increase their voter base. The Tories want mass immigration because of big business. It's in the interest of big business to have mass immigration. That's the main distinction between the two of them.
Actually, yes. I mean, I'm answering my question maybe a bit, but depending on how influential these people are, you've only got to look at the IEA, for example, the Institute of Economic Affairs think tank, around here, a much older one called the Adam Smith Institute, where there was a book done on what's wrong with Britain, what's gone wrong with Britain. I remember it was written, it's about 10 years ago. And the whole book's big, thick book like that. Went to the launch of it. Immigration is not mentioned once in this book.
Well, then you get Liz Truss, darling of the Tory members, who actually had increased immigration, if you can imagine it, as part of her plan. And that is never actually talked about it anymore for some reason.
You mentioned there, by the way, Rafe, or the James Cleverly, who's now the Home Secretary now, isn't he? He's already said, I believe, intimated that there's no chance of us leaving the European Court of Human Rights. Right? So that's that gone. Then there's Rwanda gone, and Suella Braverman has gone. When you look at that in the context of what we saw last week, we have got to come to the realization, haven't we? Or rather, I think we do realize, but I think most of us have got to come that this is what we are facing. It is not going to go any further, right? Our belief in what we want to save is never going to have a political outlet in these people, ever. You might say, well, God, it's taken you all this time to realize that. But I think it's become particularly bold. It's like these people, did they not see the Hamas, the anti-Israeli demonstrations, for example? Did they not actually look at them on the TV? We were looking at them all the time.
They've just been front and centre of my thoughts for the last month, and we all have. We've been on television talking about them. We've been on this show for the last 2 or 3 weeks talking about them solidly, and yet it seems as far as Downing Street are concerned, it's almost like they're not happening. You know, they'll put out a statement every now and again, but this is a seismic shift. This is about values. This is about what Britain is. This is about where Britain is going. This is about culture. And it seems to me that they don't care.
November the 13th, the departure of Suella, the hiring of Cameron, that's the date Tory party populism died. That's the end of it. The experiment is over. Everyone who had their hopes in this government actually doing something and being very different to what we've seen before, absolutely out the window. And the joke of Sunak saying that he's the change candidate when he's bringing back in a man who presided over 1/5 of the last 30 years that Sunak just a few weeks ago said was the greatest calamity that we've had of consensus politics. I think it's a complete disaster, and they absolutely have. They think we got over the armistice thing without any great confrontation.
Yeah.
Therefore, the issue is over.
Yes, exactly.
It's not.
That's
It's
how they
lifted
feel.
a lid
Precisely.
on a cesspit that exists and is bubbling below the surface. It's been bubbling below the surface for decades. It's now getting to boiling point, and they're just happy to put back a lid on the pressure cooker.
And also a lid on what I would call working class people.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
a lid on working class people, because whatever the media says, you know, there was a few counter demonstrations at that thing last week. And, you know, I don't want to even go into, I don't want to get into some game whereby, you know, oh, well, they were, you know, right wing, such and what. I mean, I don't care what these people say anymore. I don't care what the media say anymore. The fact is that these sort of people, they see a group of white working class guys together and they immediately think fascist, right? That is their mindset, these people. But whether it be the Red Wall or whether it be those demonstrations, it seems to me that working class people have zero possibility now, unless some new movement comes along, of influencing anything. I mean, to go back to your point about the Red Wall, I mean, you've made that point, but it was incredible opportunity, was it not? It was the most incredible opportunity in December 2019.
Yeah.
And you'd never seen anything like it. They didn't even lift a finger. I think they went to one city, I think it might have been Manchester, and they held the first cabinet there as some kind of gesture.
And that was it. Yeah, and that was it.
And then we got COVID, and quantitative easing, and the furlough scheme, which ate up all the money that should have flooded into the north. And then, of course, HS2. What did they spend all the money? Where? In the north? No, between London and Birmingham. You know, when it comes to election time, people gave their votes to the Tories. One of the reasons was because, having voted Labour for decades, they saw that the Tory government had put no money into their constituencies. They were hoping this would change things around. And by now, people should be able to see brand new transport connections, should be able to see new streets and so forth. What do they get? Money for potholes. That's not going to win you an election.
It's years and years of gaslighting, isn't it? And what's been a little bit concerning over the last few weeks, we've seen this, like you say, it's opened a lid on a cesspit. And I think people were saying before, we've got to sink the Conservative Party, we've got to do something else, we've got to vote for the smaller parties. Then, when they saw what was going on in the streets, when they saw the hatred and the filth and all the rest of it, the anti-Semitism, they were saying, oh, well, my God, it was back to the old thing again. It was, well, we can't have the Labour Party in. We just can't have the Labour Party in. There's nothing we can do. We've got to vote for the Conservative Party. And I would say, and I've been absolutely one of the most vocal people, as you know, on the anti-Semitism. I say no, that's the wrong thing to do. I've thought about this very, very carefully. I've thought about it deeply and for a long time. We must sink the Conservative Party. You've got to vote for the smaller parties. It's as simple as that.
But the thing is, I mean, I agree on that. It looks like the Tory party will be sunk down to maybe even 130 seats. Some people are saying. The fact is, they're all turning to the Labour Party.
Well, they're not all turning to the Labour
Well,
Party.
I think post Suella, I think Reform is going to be the beneficiary of Suella's departure, because I think she reflects their causes a lot more than the Labour vote.
And I think the people who are natural progressives and veer towards the left, looking at what's been happening on the streets, are looking to the SDP as well. They have had a spike. I know their presence is tiny, but they have had a spike, and they have more funding as well. So those are things to think about.
You know, you were saying that it's been at the forefront of your mind of the Hamas marches. it's funny, isn't it? There are some issues that I just couldn't get it off my mind. And I think I put that down to you realizing, even subconsciously, that it is a seminal moment, that something is going to be decided. I don't like what has been decided, because, or should I say, what appears to be, which is your point, that somehow the Tories are looking at this as something that had to be got over, right? No one died, right? So fine, it was okay. The fact that, you know, what it revealed is one thing. Of course, if you live in the Cotswolds, sorry to sound chippy about this, but, you know, like Cameron, you know, what do you know from Mohammed? What do you care?
Exactly.
What do you care what our cities now look like?
Well, when I gave the speech to our immigration conference, I said that, you know, people who live in areas with least diversity are those people who are most in favour of diversity by a factor of 2 to 1, because they actually never. It's easy to vote for something or support something when you don't see its effects in your daily life, and that's the reality. But the unfortunate reality, I mean, some of us have known that these problems are existing in our country for a long time. They just came out altogether over the last few weeks in the marches, but they've been festering across this country. And demographics is destiny, and the demographics are not in our favour on this.
Oh, they're absolutely not. It's one thing that's the most depressing thing in the world to think about, is to think about the future and demographics together, because the percentages, they pretty much point to Islamism at some point in the future, don't they?
Well, look, just to round off, we've got to talk about somebody who's Nigel Farage is now in the jungle. I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, right? Not wishing to get too heavy about this, but given the context that we've been talking about, do you think it was the right time for him to go to the jungle? Does it matter where he is?
It was the right time for him to make that decision, given that he's been quite open about receiving £1.5 million, I think it is, which will enable him to keep a Coutts account actually now, finally, given they have a £1 million threshold.
Although he's gone to Lloyds, isn't he?
But if you, yes, but if you want to have a Coutts account, you need to have a million. Yes, the problem was, if you remember, in recent weeks we've heard all this talk, will he suddenly become the leader of the Tory party? Is he going to actually have some future in politics again? I think once you go into the jungle, any chances of a political future in a mainstream party or a big party, I think, are for the birds. But, you know, I wish him well. You know, on a personal level, I mean, I like Nigel very much. I think he's a great guy, and I think a lot of people may be pleasantly surprised who hate him at how warm he is
as a person,
because he's always courteous. I've never seen him say a bad word about anybody. He might get miffed once in a while, but he never gets angry or anything else. And so I think people might be surprised at how well he does in the jungle. But I won't be watching it.
And neither will I. But it might be a complete absurdity. I mean, Nigel Farage in the jungle. Imagine him trying to explain the Northern Ireland Protocol to someone from an ex-member of Westlife or something like that. You know, I think it's just going to be completely absurd. Please, you know, why have you done for the money, obviously, but why?
Well, he says he's doing it. By the way, he's managed to negotiate cigarette breaks. I admire him for that. He's managed to get.
Well, you can't even smoke in a jungle now.
No. But this apparently was a real sticking point.
Did he say he was trying to do it to appeal to younger people?
But they always say that. I mean,
that was George Galloway's excuse for going into Big Brother.
Yes.
If you remember, he and Runa Lenska in their spandex,
exactly,
playing cats over a bowl of milk.
I'll tell you that I deal with young people. Young people do not watch television. Simple.
But apparently they do watch this. I mean, you know, the thing is, you had that. Then you had Nadine Dorries saying, "I will appeal to a great." You know, I think she said more people vote in the final of this or watch it than vote at the general election, which seems a bit odd. But anyway, she said that. And then the latest, of course, is Matt Hancock,
yes,
who basically said, "This is a great way to connect and everything." And yet, what is distinguishing? What is the basic theme to all those people? Total lack of nothingness.
Oblivion.
Annihilation.
Yes.
Annihilation.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, the only thing is Nigel never makes a wrong move. He really doesn't. I mean, there must be a good reason. There must be. He must be thinking.
I don't think he's going to have. I don't think it's going to affect him badly. Actually, in the great scheme of things, he'll come back to life as normal afterwards. But it'll be an interesting and amusing thing. We just know that given the type of people that watch the show, I think the poor guy is going to be in for every one of those testicle eating competitions, whatever they do.
I can't watch it. I've never watched it. Actually, if you were, would you go on it for £1 million? Like now, right now, supposing someone said, would you go on it for £1 million?
No.
I'd have to think about that.
on.
Yes, no,
You
I would. Well, it depends how.
I wouldn't.
Not for £1 million.
Not for £1 million. I just couldn't. I couldn't cope with it.
I'd probably be voted off in the first week, though.
Part of it depends what kind of personality you are, and I just couldn't deal with it.
What you mean? You couldn't bear the stupidity?
It's not so much the stupidity. I couldn't bear the people. I just simply
Well, isn't that
couldn't
what
bear
I
the
meant?
people.
I mean, yes. No.
I couldn't bear the people. I just couldn't do it. And I'm not being snobbish there or anything. I just I'm fairly,
Even for £1 million?
I'm fairly introverted, and I just couldn't bear the people.
And a decent proposal.
Yeah.
If you remember the film.
Yeah.
Well, so there's someone who'll do it if you want your talent scouts out there. We've got someone who will happily volunteer. And anyway, thank you very much for it. Thanks very much, Ray. We shall see you next week, all right? And have a good week in the meantime. Bye. Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.